So I actually think my internet at this hotel is good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still in Dubai. My flight leaves in like 4 hours. Brian, where are you at? You're muted,
He's
Brian.
on mute.
I know. Bella, where are you at?
I'm at my dad's in South Dakota, and I'm moving out to my place in San Diego next week. So it's finally
Ooh,
coming together.
nice, nice.
Yep.
Brian, can you talk? He was working
You
earlier.
tell me.
There you
Okay.
go.
So where are you at right now, Brian?
Izmir, Turkey, on the Aegean Sea, the west coast of Turkey,
Yeah,
Wonderful.
all three of us.
where you're coming tomorrow.
We're
I know.
global.
Yep. I'll be heading to the airport here probably in like 2 hours. I'll be meeting Sahar Kaya, one of my clients. We'll be meeting at the airport, and we'll be joining Brian. And we won't have an extensive travel day like Brian had. I think Brian had 3 different flights, right?
Yeah, it was like a 15-hour travel day, but it was all right.
Mm. But well, let's get right to it. Um, Obviously, me and Brian, we were here in Dubai. Brian was doing the broadcast for the Dubai Fitness Championship, and I was here just providing support for B.Friendly and some of the athletes I represent. And Bella, you actually got to stay in the States in one time zone for a while.
Oh yeah.
But you said you were able to watch some of the broadcasts and then just kind of get a general feel. But yeah, this is what this show's about. We're kind of recap. We've had a couple days to kind of recap, gather, marinate on some stuff, just kind of soak it all in, and that's what it's all about. So, what do we want to start off with, Brian? You tell me.
Well, I think actually it's nice that we have balanced perspectives from some of us were there and some were not, because this past weekend, besides the Dubai Fitness Championships, FitFest was going on, Legends Masters Legends was going on, and Bella and Patrick, you will know this as well as I, but from this year traveling abroad as extensively as I have, it's really revealing when you spend a few weeks in Europe or Asia or Australia or anywhere other than North America, how easy it is to get disconnected from what's going on in North America. And therefore, when you're in North America, it can sometimes be just as easy to not be aware of maybe what's happening internationally. And on the big picture level, this is a frustration from the community to the competition side that the international community has often felt, I think more often than not, justifiably so, potentially sometimes not. It's not as bad as they make it seem, but when it comes to CrossFit HQ, on the game side, the affiliate side, etc. And so I was just curious, kind of observing from where we were, what the experience was like in the States when you had these 3 different things going on. I mean, most of, if not all of, the CrossFit HQ Games team was in Arizona at the Legends Championship, and they were personally putting out content from there. Of course, on Instagram there was content from there, but there was no live stream of that, and it was kind of piecing together information about maybe what was happening there with regards to the competition, and obviously the competition this year, but also the evolution of the competition as it starts to transition into becoming the CrossFit Games event for the Masters divisions next season. Then you had the Fit Fest, again, no live broadcast from that, but a variety of different options that you could potentially follow along to see what's going on. And then obviously Dubai Fitness Championship, no live broadcast on Friday, though we tried to provide some context through a post-production and live stream on Instagram, and then full broadcast on Saturday and Sunday. But the time zone's the most dramatic difference. So there's that challenge in terms of if you want to watch the content. So I just kind of wanted to start by asking Bella what that was like, not working at any of them, having the
Yeah.
interest potentially in all of them, and what did you choose to watch, and how easy or hard was it?
So I would say it was a weekend spent binging CrossFit content. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I also don't think it was an easy thing to do. So when everything is on a different time zone, you kind of pick and choose. So in the morning, I would wake up and I would immediately check what's going on in Dubai. I would immediately either log on to broadcast, I'd log on to whatever B.Friendly's put out. I'd go into both of your pages and I'm trying to figure out what the heck has happened. I even texted you a couple times, what's happening? What's going on? And at that point, you're texting back, Bella, just wait. Just stop. You're fine. And so I think in that way, I felt disconnected, and I'm not normally used to feeling so disconnected from an event. It's okay, I really have to go out of my way to care about what's happening in Dubai to figure out what's going on. And I think most people, if they're really into CrossFit, if it's not easy to find, they're just, they're done. They're not going to watch it. And that's just human nature. If they have to go out of their way to find it, they're not going to go out of their way to find it. But I would say next year, if you guys are going to do a kind of live stream from your phone, I want a forehead camera. So I get Brian Friend's perspective of all of the events. I don't need you to hold your phone. I want a camera right here on your forehead. Or maybe we can do like the spectacles that have the cameras in it so I can see exactly your POV. That's the one thing that I want. I want Brian Friend's POV from the event. But I would say overall, it was easy to follow, even though I was behind. I'm getting up in the morning, and that's the first thing I was doing. When it came to FitFest, there was no stream, obviously. It was brand new. But what I did enjoy is, even though I went out of my way, I'm asking people that I know that are there. I'm asking spectators that I know that are there how it was. I'm asking people who I know on the judging staff how it's going. Is it fun? Is it easy? What is the judging like? I'm asking what the events are like. And there's different people that I knew that were at the event that I could get their own experiences. So I could kind of, I'm not there, but in my mind, I know what events are like. So I can kind of piece together what's happening. And I told you guys, that's when we jumped on. I loved the content that you guys put out. Big shout out to Nico for doing that. And he's a phenomenal creator. So big ups for getting him on there. The interviews were phenomenal. Danielle Brandon, even though she lost her Instagram for a couple minutes there, her interviews are great, and I really enjoyed listening to her. And then also with Legends going on, I've been to MFC a couple times, and so I know the Masters events, and I know a lot of the athletes that are there. I know the people that are working the events, and I know some of the brands that were there. And so I'm trying to gather what was going on there. And I think of all of the events that happened over the weekend, that was the one that I heard the least encouraging content about, and the least encouraging this is happening. There were some issues with the brands that were there bringing enough, product for people that are there. And if you're a title sponsor, you want to make sure you have enough product if that's what you want. All of the athletes were encouraged, obviously, to wear the apparel sponsor. And that's great. I love that. I think the uniform aspect of CrossFit is a very important and exciting thing if you want to look professional. But in terms of the event experience from spectators and athletes, that's what I heard was kind of lacking. And I think it's tough when you have an event that is all 4 masters. There's plenty of them. It's not the athletes that are the problem, but it's getting them that same intensity. And the athletes had fun. They said the workouts were very fun and challenging, but it wasn't that level of, this is a very exciting competition to be at if you're not competing. And so I think what I've learned from not being at these 3 events and kind of consuming everything is just, there's a lot of work to be done. Brian, are you back? No, Pat's on mute.
Yeah, and it's especially with the Legends, I'm not. You tell me, am I here or no?
Yeah, you're good. I can hear you now. This is what happens when we're global, y'all. We're too far away.
It's not my fault.
Tell Patrick he's muted.
No,
I can hear both of you.
Keep talking, Brian.
Oh, well, with regards to the comment, the last comment that Bella made about the Legends Championship, I think this is where it'll be interesting to see how much of a role CrossFit HQ plays in terms of the programming from beginning to end of the season next year for each of the different competitions or divisions that are going to be kind of segregated out. One of the things that Dave Castro was the best at is creating competition layouts that are digestible, exciting, and flow really well for the spectators. And if that is some of the feedback that you were getting that was lacking from them, maybe that's an opportunity for CrossFit HQ to take some interest in working with those competitions to say, hey, this might be a great workout on paper, or it might be a great workout for the athletes or for an affiliate, but here's a few things that we might recommend in terms of the flow or the layout, whatever, that can take it to the next level in terms of a presentation. The counter to that is that Dave Castro has a lot on his plate. He's not only the director of sport, he's the director of training. I have no idea about what either of those jobs entails, but from the outside looking in, it feels to me like he probably is. Maybe he's the best person for both of those jobs, but if he's in both of those roles, I don't know if he's the best person for either of those jobs. It's very difficult, to be the leader of two different divisions of a three-pronged company. Time and responsibility and whatever, and how much is he willing to delegate, and does he have people in those positions who can execute the same level as him with the experience that he has? And that has been a question for me, and I think for many people, since he kind of stepped into the second role, CrossFit sport director, after taking on the CrossFit training director role. And so even though he might be a great person to do that, maybe Adrian is equally qualified to do that. Will they take the initiative to work with those people in year 1 and year 2 to help elevate them to that level, or will they let them on their own and let them make their own mistakes as they focus primarily on the elite team and individual side of things? So all those questions kind of remain to be seen, but Adrian Bosman and Heather Lawrence, at the very least, have gone to the Pit Team Throwdown. They've gone to the Wheel Wand Games. Now they've gone to the Masters Legends Games. They've been building relationships with each of those people, and they certainly are observing, and if they're seeing some of the similar things, you would hope that they would even start working with those
competitions.
I think we lost him, but I definitely, I get what he's saying, and that's one of those things people ask all the time. I've been, I was at Pit Team and they were there, and it was awesome having Boz and Heather there, and people, it matters when they show up. It matters. People get really excited about it, and it makes them feel important. But I want to know what the actual involvement is moving forward. And I think that's probably where Brian's kind of trying to get to is, yes, we have the adaptive, we have Wheel Wad, we have Pit Team Throwdown, we have Legends, and then we also have in Texas the individuals and the teams. But what is the programming going to look like? Is it going to be left to your own, and then every event is different? Is it actually the games? If it's all these other events and all these other programmers? Because in my opinion, if I'm going to go and try to compete, say I'm 17 years old and I want to compete at Pit Team Throwdown, and that's my CrossFit Games, I want to have the same workouts as what they're going to do in Fort Worth. I want to see what that goes like. And I want to have maybe a scaled down version, but that's what I want. When it comes to the adaptive, I'm sure they're the same way. They don't want, Kevin, phenomenal programmer. And looking at the workouts they had last week, I was also talking to the woman who won the seated division. She goes to the gym that I'm at here. Awesome human. And we're talking about all these workouts, and she wants more competition too. So oh, hi, Brian. You're back.
I switched to a different internet connection, so we'll see.
I picked up where you left off.
Yeah. That's why we make such a good team. She finishes your sentences, Brian.
Yes.
But go ahead and finish your thought, Bella.
No, you're good. And it's one of those things I want to know, just like Brian is kind of saying, what the actual involvement is. And can you be good at everything? Can you be overlooking and programming and also all of these divisions at once? It was one thing when everyone's competing in the same week in the same place and you can look and see how things are going. But when it's all these different events run by different people, will they get the same treatment? Will they have the same access to equipment? Will they have the same access to media and broadcasting? All of these other things aside from just programming.
Judges, volunteers, competition floors that are big enough to tell stories. I mean, I went to 2 of these 3 competition venues as well, and I believe the Pit Team Throwdown has the most consistency that they'll carry over to next season, being on the same. I'm assuming the same time of year, same area. I think they might be able to use some local facilities, but Brock and Stephanie are super well integrated in that community, and they've been running a high-level teenage competition there for a while. I don't know where the Masters CrossFit Games is going to be next year. I don't know where the Adaptive CrossFit Games is going to be next year, but I did go to both of those venues because Desert City was in the same one, and I would say that those venues are okay, but if you're talking about the CrossFit Games for a large number of athletes, which both of those are significantly larger than the teenage games will be, just based on number of divisions, that they need to find a different place. They need to find, or at least a different layout that's going to be able to expand. I haven't had a chance to go in and look at the Masters Legends leaderboard yet, but the other thing that I was curious about was how much of an international presence was there this year. And in the wheel wad game, same thing. There were small numbers of athletes per division. They basically had like one or two of the best athletes, but it was, they're not at that level this season, and next year they're going to be. And if you're hosting more people internationally, are other things that begin to factor into that equation as well. So there's a lot of I think excitement, and potentially rightfully so, but still many questions to be answered, I think, also.
Absolutely. I was talking to Andrea, who's at Wheel Wad, and we're talking, and she's saying, there's this difference between equality and equity. They're not saying that they want everything that the games in Fort Worth is going to have, but let's make it equitable. Let's get some really good equipment. Let's do all these things. Oh, she did not like the rower you brought. I did want to tell you that. She didn't like it. I know you're pumped about it. She said it was not it. She didn't like it. But then also,
no, well,
go ahead.
That's kind of why we brought it there. Like, that's not a final product. If anyone is curious what we're talking about, I actually wrote an article for the Wheel Wad Games World Tour Stop that'll be coming out later this week, and you might be able to see go back and look at some stuff on Instagram. But it's basically a prototype. We took feedback from a variety of the wheelchair or seated athletes and sent it back to the manufacturer, and also to the leading equipment manufacturer in the U.S. with the intentions of going back to the drawing board with that direct feedback from those athletes. And I think that's really, in terms of this is an area that I have very new experience in, of creating equipment or being involved in that process for the variety of different adaptive divisions. But you gotta make it, let the people who need to use it or want to use it or could benefit from using it try it, listen to them, and then go back and recreate. So that's kind of where the process is at. And I was just grateful that they tried it, and they gave us honest feedback, which was really nice.
That's always good.
Before we move on, Dave is notorious for saying that he doesn't care, or not doesn't care, but he doesn't pay attention to other events outside of the games. Do you think that needs to change? For him to be the head of sport, and you have all these events with CrossFit's name on it. For instance, Dubai they weren't affiliated with CrossFit, but FitFest was. So,
right.
Legends was. A lot of these events we've been to they have the CrossFit name. With him being the head of sport, shouldn't he show more interest in these?
So I love that question. Go ahead,
sure,
Brian.
He could, or he could have someone on his team who is responsible for being more knowledgeable about the global CrossFit sport community, because I don't think that with the number of jobs and responsibilities that he has, that's that practical for him to fit into his current schedule. But it certainly should be something that he wants someone on his team who's aware of. I think if the sport of CrossFit is going to continue to grow and evolve globally, there needs to be some kind of an improved kind of connection between the CrossFit Games season and everything else. And the fact that he mentioned the Triple Crown a couple of weeks ago gives me a little bit of hope in that regard. Now, those are a very limited number of events, 2 in a very limited part of the world so far, 1 country, although Rogue is talking about potentially expanding to international market. But nevertheless, those are not the global CrossFit community. Those are a very, 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 very small subsection of it. And there's, I don't know if we find a better panel of people who could represent the international CrossFit global competition community than the 3 of us, based on what we've done these last couple of years. And so we can say with a lot of clarity and confidence that there are many people running great competitions around the world who feel similarly, that they're not they're like stagnant or kind of at a standstill in terms of their ability to progress, because they're just being, I don't know if ignored, forgotten, or just not taken an interest in by that CrossFit Games team, who is investing a lot in the CrossFit Games season and maybe 1 or 2 other events.
Well, so I agree. Go ahead. Go ahead, Pat.
That didn't we? So what you're kind of describing is a GM, essentially.
A bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, I agree with everything that you're saying, And I mean, we typically have the same thoughts on things like that. But then the argument and question that I always have is, what is the point of being a CrossFit licensed event? What benefit are you actually getting if you're not getting at least someone that's connected to Dave to give you the feedback and the insight on everything that's going on? Because I've been to some CrossFit licensed events that have been amazing and they are well run. The programming is great. And if Dave was there, he'd probably look at the event and say, yeah, this is great. I would stamp my name on this. I approve this event. But I've also been to events that are CrossFit licensed that are not that phenomenal and that do need a lot of work. And that if someone had come in and said, hey, I'm going to help you out with XYZ and make this an event that CrossFit is proud to put their name on, not necessarily because they can pay for it, but because they're actually saying we support this event, that they need the help. And then thirdly, I've been to events that aren't CrossFit licensed at all that are run better than some of the CrossFit licensed events that I've been to. And so my question is, yes, I think Dave or someone on Dave's team should be involved with these events, because if you're thinking of Dave has so many things going on. He shouldn't be, texting any of these people, hey, yeah, this is what we should be doing. Someone else should be doing that on his behalf. But if it's coming to Pit Team, it's coming to Legends, if it's coming to Wheelwad, he should have some sort of involvement. Also the question, yes, I do. I'm very much let's have a chat after the event. And a lot of times the organizers, they want my feedback because I go to all of these events and the conversation is always great. It's never, you're doing this wrong, your event is bad. It's, this is how we can grow and this is how we can all move forward and make the sport of CrossFit better together, because everybody could be doing CrossFit. There's so many events. There's so many people that want to be involved. So many athletes that want to be competing. So let's make these events better. And if you're attending, almost 30 events a year, then you have the insight to say, hey, here's what I think would make this event better. And the organizers that actually listen are the ones that have the better events moving forward.
Brian, final word before we move on. I mean, just to move us on here.
I think the fact there's a few things that CrossFit HQ's games team have done this year. The mentioning of the Triple Crown, the outsourcing some certain aspects of those CrossFit Games season events to different competitions that have been existing for a long time, that are positive in terms of the potential for more integration from the CrossFit Games team with external groups that have been running competitions for a long time. And there's, and if those are things in the right direction, then maybe there's some more plans for that down the line. At least that's what I'm hopeful of, because the CrossFit Games still carry the biggest flag. I mean, when I'm calling the event in Dubai, I'm referencing athletes' performance and potential in the CrossFit Games season. It still is that pinnacle. And that's not to say that there aren't other extremely well run or important events, but if the CrossFit Games season finds that way to continue to blend with some of the off-season competitions, I think that in the long run, that'll be better for the sport.
I like it. Drop the hammer.
Let's actually move.
Oh, you muted yourself.
No, I got a tricky mute button here. I'm used to my mic, but let's talk about the event. The whole purpose was us to mainly talk about the Down Under. Like I said at the start of the show, we'll
Dubai.
recap. Yeah,
Dubai.
Dubai. We'll recap Fit Fest and some of the other things later on, and bring some people that are actually there to give us their opinions. But me and Brian were there. Brian, like I said, Brian was on the broadcast. I was kind of like boots on ground on the floor, behind the scenes. So, how do you want to start this off with Brian talking about Dubai? You just want to just look at the straight up board and see whose picks did better, or
oh my gosh,
or do you want to go like kind of a day by day, like give a
I think for this particular year, going day by day is kind of nice, because each day brought a very different experience. Dubai, and if we're going to start with the first day, I mean, Dubai is it's famous at this point for doing something that is extremely unique to Dubai and usually big and bold on day number one. But most of the things that people were projecting or expecting or predicting didn't really happen this year. We didn't go to the ocean. We didn't go to the beach. We didn't climb a famous monument. We went to 2 different military facilities and did an event that was 7 minutes long at most, and very technical and high execution with no opportunity to practice. And then we went to the police academy to do an Olympic lifting total, which had already gotten scrutiny just upon being announced, and then took on a format that was even more preclusive, I guess, than the CrossFit Games
Good
was,
word.
and that took some heat for only having 2 lifts. And you know, Saud was very generous to come on and speak with us about it, and he talked specifically about the fact that he loves to see the athletes forced into situations that are uncomfortable for them and see how they react. And on day 1, they got that twice.
Yeah, I will say, watching, and me and Bella were kind of talking about this earlier. It's like you're probably going to hear a couple of shows that come on, and I've heard a lot of displeasure in the programming, but I think having Saud come on and give his opinion, it's like, we have to say that this competition wasn't looking for the fittest person in the world. They're looking for the fittest person based on the test that Saud wanted to give. So the athletes showed up, they did the test, and the best ones came out of it. He wasn't looking for the fittest person. He was looking to see who would survive his test. So it's more.
And by the way,
yeah,
a lot of the athletes that were competing there this season, it was their second, third, fourth, fifth times competing there. And
so
if you're competing somewhere for the third, fourth, fifth time, there's a reason. So and it's usually a positive reason. There's something good that's happening there that's encouraging some of the best athletes in the world to come back year after year. And additionally, I spoke with Mia Hesketh. I think this was her 4th individual time competing there. And she's also competed there on a team after the initial athlete brief on Thursday. And she said it was very obvious the athletes that had never been here before and the ones that have. So if you're coming there for a multiple time, you are fully aware of what you're stepping into in terms of not just a great life experience of going to a very cool place, especially when it's in the tennis stadium, the hotel experience, the breakfast, the proximity of everyone and everything is very, very nice and unique. But additionally, you just understand that it's not, it takes on a flavor of its own, and that Saud is a unique competition director that has opportunity to do things that other people can't or won't do. And that also there might be some things that if your expectations are of a certain thing that you're going to be let down, because sometimes he changes things on the fly, sometimes he changes his mind. But the counter is every single time you take the floor, you have a chance to win money. And there's big prize money there. It's, so there's these really, really positive things that attract athletes to come back year after year. And when they do that, they come there with the understanding that this is the guy running the event. This is how he runs it. And we just accept that, if you look back at the athletes in, everyone, most of the athletes put something on Instagram after the competition, just a reflection. It can be super in depth or relatively succinct, but all of them are saying thank you to him and to the competition. And then they'll say, this was a,
if you only knew, Barkley, if you only knew.
Maybe we can bring Barkley one year. And
by
the way, Barkley did do some recon work for us for the competition team from the States a couple times. So thank you, Barkley, for being willing to do that from afar. And I totally lost my train of thought. So someone else go ahead.
That's okay. I'll weave us all together. So before you jumped on, Brian, yes, Pat and I were talking and we were saying Dubai is known for being very innovative and it's a spectacle. Everything about it is kind of flashy and showcasey. And so that's where you're seeing it is in these workouts. You're seeing it as an obstacle course race. You're seeing it as a non-traditional liftoff. You're seeing it with deck squats and A jumps and all of these things. And it's not necessarily to find the fittest in the world. It's let's put on a really cool show while also doing fitness.
And that's
what we're watching. Yeah.
I think I have the perfect example of that. And it was probably referred to on the broadcast is it wasn't a tennis center. And there was a very famous tennis player that was there, a man named Andy Murray, who I think is currently ranked 6th. Yeah. So he actually was given a VIP pass. And the guy who runs the tennis stadium was like, hey, he pointed into the general admission, not the VIP area. And Andy Murray was sitting up there with some fellow tennis players watching. And he watched about probably about 85%. He had to leave to go work out, but then he came back and watched the elimination event. And I had a chance to talk to him about what we were supposed to set up for interview the next day, but something came up. But I did get a quote from him, and I asked him what he thought of CrossFit. And if this is an adults podcast, he said he thought CrossFit was fucking brilliant.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
But this is a person who didn't know anything about CrossFit, still doesn't know anything about CrossFit, but just saw the spectacle like you were talking about and was amused by it.
I think that's actually a really nice transition to day number 2, since we're kind of taking these day by day. I thought that the competition on day number 2, there are a few things that I might have just tweaked or added to each of the workouts that I think could have enhanced the digestibility in some capacities. But overall, I thought that they produced one of the most exciting days from start to end of CrossFit that I've seen in a long time. The first workout that day was a 10-round workout. And in no heat, in every heat, 6 heats, there were like 2 or 3 athletes that were maintaining pace with each other for a majority of the workout, meaning that there were close races at the end of what was essentially a 12-minute AMRAP. It was only the last heat of the men where there were some finishers. It was nice that the men went second and we finally got some finishers. And it was, a workout that on paper is amazing for Lazar Jukic, but still perfect execution, clean run, got a nice celebration from him, borrowed from Jason Hopper and Dallin Pepper, I believe. And then, Roman finished close behind him anyway. But I think that in the the second heat of the women, there was like a 3-way tie for first on a 12-minute workout. Like, it was really close races all the way through. The second workout, I actually, it was my favorite workout of the weekend. It was that EMOM workout. I'd love to know what Bella thought about this one. But I was blown away with how awesome the presentation of this workout was. I think there were many people that were intrigued by it when it first came out, and I hope that people kind of were like I think that in this case it would be easy to say I don't like it. An EMOM workout in competition doesn't make any sense. But for me, it's one of those things like, that's interesting. I want to see how it plays out on the floor, and afterwards I'll offer an opinion. And so that's kind of the approach that I took, and I think that coming in without any expectation ended up being in my favor, of course. And then I was beyond impressed with how this workout played out. Again, there's a few elements of it that I think, in terms of the execution of the overall competition, could have been refined. But what people saw on the competition floor was, in my eyes, phenomenal. Yeah. And then you finish with an elimination event. And Bella, you can give your thoughts on all these right after. You finish with an elimination event that it did have a mistake in terms of one athlete advancing to the final instead of another. That's a little unfortunate, but the flow for an elimination event was way smoother, way faster, and therefore way better for spectators than many, or if not all, other elimination style events that we've seen in the past. And with basically a minute and 20 seconds for every event, you always are going to have close races. So all day long, every time the athletes took the floor, there was something exciting in terms of closeness of race that was happening from beginning to end.
So 2 things I'll say. I will say the EMOM workout, when we chatted before the event, was the one that I think we had the most questions on. We were the most skeptical about. We were thinking, I don't know, how's that really going to work? And we had a lot of questions, but I think when it came down to the actual execution, it worked out really well. And everything we were wondering, we're like, is there going to be increased weights on the barbell? All of these questions that we had no idea what was going on. And you probably even then knew a lot more than I did. Pleasantly surprised. But I always want to give you the credit for knowing more than me. But I think for me, it was event 5 that I was at Rogue. And so I'm at Rogue watching the elimination event for both the CrossFit athletes and the strongman athletes. And that was the, workout for the weekend that let me down the most, because elimination in my mind is high intensity. It is a battle and a race to the end. And you saw some athletes, tripping over the log at Rogue and, obliterating and somehow making it through. And then some athletes were allowed to skip. And there was all these kind of extra things that made it slow and not that exciting. And if you had left 5 minutes later, you could come back in your seat and nothing would have happened. It wasn't fast. It wasn't exciting, but elimination was fast and was exciting. And when it comes to CrossFit, for an event like Dubai, it needs to be exciting, because if people are going to tune in at 6 a.m. in the morning, if they're not there, it has to be exciting to watch. And so I wasn't there, physically in the tennis stadium, but I can say it was exciting for me. Was it as exciting for spectators in the actual arena? That's something that I want to know. And it's an even greater question that I had for the overall event, Brian.
Yeah, like I said, day number 2, events 3, 4, and 5, I felt like there were close races and exciting presentation of workouts throughout the entire day. It's when I'm on the broadcast, I'm not that actually in tune with the crowd. There's certain places where that can happen, but in this case, we were standing above the finish line, up above the crowd, and I was just so focused on trying to communicate well what was happening on the floor that I didn't notice that most of the time. But Patrick might actually be the best person to give insight to that.
Regarding what?
How engaged the crowd was to the races and the events on day number 2.
There were actually more. I think those 2 events, 4 and 5, the engagement was really good, actually, because those are really easy events for them to fans to kind of see who's winning, who's progressing, and they're rather simple workouts. The EMOM, if you didn't know anything about CrossFit, I mean, some people are slightly confused in terms of like they didn't realize, and I don't think it was explained well enough. Omar did his best, and I think by the time the men went, people understood what the workout was, because it's just repeating. But that was scored it's based on you doing
front squats,
60 front squats. So, but just surviving through the other stuff. So the first couple of rounds, people were like, okay, and then they saw people just kind of staying behind and not advancing, and people are wondering why. But by the time the men came around, they figured it out, and it was an exciting race. I mean, especially when they're counting down. Omar and Mike did a great job of letting them know how many reps were going on. And when it came to elimination event, the crowd was into that one as well. And
that's awesome.
Bella, one of the questions we were talking about before is, and you get a lot of criticism about this, and I think it's a lot of just I don't know, maybe just being used to what we're used to seeing in the West, in the U.S. and in Europe. But people are criticizing like, oh, there's no one in the stands, and I thought actually the stands were fine for what it is.
Really?
If people know what the middle, how that event is, yes, the sole purpose isn't to sell out that thing, in my opinion. This is an event that's funded by the UAE Sports Council. It's not funded by, qualifiers and, sponsors or anything like that. It's funded by the government organization, the Sports Council. And their sole purpose is to bring sport, to promote sport. And the best way to do that is by bringing athletes in and bringing name athletes in. Unfortunately, UAE is very similar to Las Vegas, where there's something always going on. And there's similar stuff going on. And I think that was one reason why. And I think the reason why there was a better crowd this year was, and I think Brian will talk about this later, was to implement inventing the golf fitness championship. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Gulf countries, they all basically sent a CrossFit team and they competed against each other. And it was the first time they've done that. It's very similar to what they do with the Gov Games, but it's something that I hope that they promote and they bring back, because it'll build, and especially it'll bring, think of it as like a CrossFit Olympics for the Gulf Coast.
Super cool.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And there's a lot of pride when it comes to their teams, when it comes to stuff like that. So I think Saud, he might be onto something with that. And then the last day they had some community. What was the Battle of the Ergs, Brian?
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Tell me everything. What is this Battle of the Ergs?
I don't know the exact workout, but there were community level. Like, it was not part of the GFC. It was not part of the DFC. So there were CrossFitters from the local community, the boxes there. They came to do this workout on the competition floor using only ergs. And I believe the winning time for the teams was
It was
1
over
hour,
an hour.
37 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm out. No, I'm out.
Yeah.
Oh my
I did.
gosh.
Yeah. But these are all local CrossFit affiliate teams that were there.
Patrick, can you just bring up this comment by Justin Kotler, please, so I
Yes.
can address it, and then we
Yeah,
can
let's-
move on from it. Yes, the current scoring system, or the current scores for the total points that you're seeing on the website are inaccurate. The ones from Sunday night are the accurate ones. This is a points per place scoring, and I spoke with Cy this morning, and he's trying to get that changed on the leaderboard. So this does not reflect the results from the competition that happened on Sunday night. I haven't refreshed with the leaderboard on my computer, so I do have them here and can read them off when we get to the leaderboard section of things.
Yeah.
So Justin, you're correct. That's not the official leaderboard, and it should be corrected at some point. What you guys saw on Sunday night was the correct results.
Hi, Justin.
But to kind of wrap that up, what you were saying in terms of fans, I thought as fans, when I went and talked to the vendors,
Yeah.
all the vendors, they were really happy.
Okay.
Anytime they're breaking into action, it seemed like there's people out there. I mean, there are people buying and purchasing. This is the first year that, for instance, Podium was making their debut there, and they had a guy there, Mason, and who is an Asia semifinals, and he kind of heads up the Podium distribution there, and he said it went great. He's extremely happy. I talked to some other brands, local brands there. They're extremely happy, and just a general feeling. And then I know I was watching Spin's recap, and he mentioned something is like, if they didn't spend money on broadcast, then that would bring fans into the stands. No, it wouldn't. Not at all.
Really.
No. So you need to keep.
Was he saying that? Was he saying that seriously, or was he saying that in jest of FitFest? And the
No, he was
decision that
saying
they
that
made on day number 2.
He was saying that regarding the buy, and I think he might have been referencing FitFest on that as well. But the feed, and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think the feed itself isn't kind of like it's basically it's broadcasted live on basically like a local channel, and they take that, so it's government funded.
It's on Dubai Sports TV. Yeah.
Yes.
So you can watch it on the TV channel there, and then they I don't know if it's a simultaneous stream or they push that stream to the YouTube channel to be watched internationally. Yes, but I have to assume that he was saying that in jest, because there was about 100,000 people that watched the day 2 and day 3 stream, and you're never going to get 100,000. First of all, the stadium only seats like 3,000. You're never going to get that many eyes on Dubai, which is what you talked about, Patrick, earlier as being one of the primary reasons why they have this competition: get eyes on Dubai and provide a sporting opportunity in that city, in that country. And secondarily, he, in a previous episode, I think he, on the second day of FitFest, he's like, I don't know why they wouldn't let us stream day 2. You get, look at how many views we've already had on day 1. And I don't think that there's how many of those, let's just call it 10,000 people that watch the Spin stream of FitFest on day 1 are living in Birmingham, UK, and have the option to also go there. I have to think it's a small percentage. So
yeah, I think like John was talking about something, and then but I don't think he might have been.
Yeah, draw your daggers is saying the same thing as me. So anyway, of course, yes, for FitFest, it's like, hey, they had how many other things going on there, and it's in the UK, which is
they had
Yeah.
It was an expo.
Oh, I know how many other things they had going on. They had the athletics, they had the rowing, they had the weightlifting, they had the strength and depth triples that was going on. Like different divisions were competing on different days. They had a ton of stuff there. And when you have, I was thinking about this on the airplane the other day, because I know that there's been a lot of competition or talk about competitions. And then there's this forecasted thought that, especially with the French Throwdown taking on the CrossFit Games semifinal in Europe this year, that when you have an elite level competition, it can be very advantageous to have the community divisions or some other competition that's going on. And even in the case of Dubai this year, with the GFC being that kind of subsidiary or secondary thing that's happening, that it just increases an interest locally and you're part of the world, and the increases the number of people that are on site. I was thinking about it on the airplane because as I was walking through the different sections, I was like, oh, the first class is the elite division. And what floats the cost of the airplane being able to fly is the coach class. All those people buying those seats and sitting so close, the aisles get narrower and narrower as you go back through the different things and whatever. But that's like what the narrower aisles, the narrower seats is more money coming in. And that supports the opportunity to have the first class, that supports at some events the opportunity to have the elite division and maybe even to broadcast it if you have enough money coming in. So that kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of an analogy that
Well,
I
like
thought of
Torian Pro.
yesterday.
It's just like
Torian,
Torian Pro. We have the
like
great
Many
broadcast
events, yeah.
and
the
the
MAC,
community division.
the MAC used to when they were sanctional. The Granite Games try to bring it back when they, especially the last year. Wadapalooza is another good example where the community events keeps the elite events up.
Madrid championships.
Madrid's a perfect example too. And I don't think Dubai's there yet. I think they do have a very, very, Brian,
I'm not saying that Dubai, I said there's a few exceptions to this. Rogue doesn't need to do that.
no, Rogue
Dubai
doesn't.
doesn't need to do that. They can do that a little bit, but it's a cultural thing. And if
Yes.
people, the people that are watching and asking these questions, I can only assume that they're watching and ask those questions for the first time, or they just forgot over the past 12 months, because we have this conversation every year when it comes to Dubai. You're never going to get 10,000 people in the sands there, and that's not their goal. They do like having people there because it's a better environment, but and Saud said there's a variety of different reasons why he invites these athletes, but some of the athletes that are coaching in various cities and gyms in Dubai, those communities will come and support those athletes. When Julia Cato was out there carrying her farmer's carries on the last day, I mean, there's a subsection of the crowd that was like cheering aggressively the entire time she would carry it, and then when she put it down, they would cheer and wait for her to pick it up again. Elliot Simmons was competing this year. He used to live there. He still has friends there. They had a subsection of people that were there, cheering for and rooting, watching him compete. Yeah, and etc. There's a half dozen to a dozen athletes that either have lived in Dubai or are living there in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, I should say now. And those communities will come from the gyms there, and that's okay. There are some diehard fans, like our boy Patrick from Germany, that make the trip there. And then there are some local fans, but not a ton, that will come and watch. And a lot of people in that community, by the way, or that culture, they'll come and watch for an hour and then leave. So there's also like this rotating group of people that won't just sit there for 6 hours, even though it is condensed to a 6-hour time period, which I think is good for several other reasons. They might not stay the whole time. And that's just part of that culture and part of that competition. And I actually am like hopeful that one year it won't be a topic of conversation, because similarly to what Mia Hesketh said, like if you're expecting the crisp and clean and perfect run competition on the programming side of things, you're coming to the wrong place. And if you're expecting the crowd to be 10,000 strong, then you're not listening and paying attention year after year.
Yeah.
That's the note right there, because the messages that I'm getting are, where are the spectators? Does anyone go to Dubai? All of these things, just from the general population of people who enjoy CrossFit and enjoy consuming CrossFit content. So that point you just made right there, that's it. That's what needs to be said forever and ever.
There's a reason why Dubai's been around for 11 years, and it's not because it sells out. It's because it's backed. It's built. It's made for athletes to showcase themselves. It's not about yes, they would love a sell. They would love fans to show up, and I think they're on the right path. I think the whole Gulf community, talking to other organizers from the Phoenix Sand Clash, they're just in the infancy of bringing CrossFit, and I think Saud's onto something. If he can bring some loyalty or these teams in to battle, these countries' teams to battle, fans will start coming. That the Qatar and Doha, that community, that CrossFit community is growing, and that's we'll talk to Brittany Weiss about that in a future episode regarding that. But yeah.
So do you think that it would help CrossFit grow internationally to do more showcases like this with some of the best names? There's almost a guaranteed payout to some degree, versus trying to make these mega community events that are trying to get as many signups and qualifiers and things. Do you think the way to go is the Fit Fest route, where you've got this really amazing small group of athletes that everybody knows and loves, that wants to watch them, and something like Dubai.
It
Yeah, I
depends.
think it's a combination. I think that
Yeah.
there are places in the season and around the world that the answer is one or the other, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
So, and it's just kind of understanding that. And by the way, other sports are like that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move
So-
on away from that. Yeah. Just kind of let's concentrate
Yeah.
now. I mean, I guess in closing, talking to event organizers, the one that I've talked to, they came up to me and they want the Phoenix Games is a perfect example. They want us to be involved. They want B.Friendly involved. They asked me how we can get athletes to come to their event, and then Stan Clash the same way. So they want to grow and they want athletes to be there, and they think the best way to do is have some of these athletes. And Luka Jukic is, and we'll talk about Luka and what we've talked about him before, what he's been doing, and we'll talk about him some more here. But he's a perfect example.
I want to get him. I want to get him on the show. By the way, I forgot to tell
Yeah,
you.
get him on the show. It's his birthday. Happy
busy
birthday,
this week.
Luka.
He's busy this
Yeah.
weekend. But yeah,
In a couple weeks.
in a couple weeks, maybe after. Well, he has Sand Clash at the beginning, but we'll get him on. But in any case,
Yeah.
all right. Let's speaking of Luka, let's talk about the men, and let's start off with let's talk about his brother.
Yeah.
Like you said, leaderboard is not the one we see right now. It's not.
I can give you the. I'll give you guys the audible through Audible. I'll give you guys the accurate leaderboard.
I would kind of lead off with that. I mean, we can easily talk about Roman, but I want to talk about the Lazar and Ricky battle. I think that was probably the highlight of the weekend. Brian,
just for context of people who don't know, Roman did win the competition. He had 717 points. Ricky ended up coming in second place on 628 points, but Lazar Jukic was in second place from the beginning of the competition all the way until the final event. He ends up on 605 points, and Ricky made up 50 points, I think, on the final event alone to jump him on the leaderboard. And we skipped over day number 3, but the reason that he was able to make up 50 points on one event is because of cuts that existed on the last day that changed the scoring system. There are a ton of different things that we could say about that, but I think that we've already addressed them at the broad level, which is this is Saud's competition. He runs it the way that he wants to. It was an invite-only event. When you showed up for it, you're just accepting that. And so he announced that, and the athletes rolled with the punches. And I think that the spectators and fans and skeptics should as well. And so anyway, coming into the final, it was a different test than the athletes faced the entire weekend, because it was extremely upper body muscular endurance fatiguing with a unbroken handstand walk course, 70 and 50-pound dumbbell shoulder overheads, sets of overhead squats, and ring muscle ups. So and then they had to come back. And at the end, it didn't really, the going out didn't matter that much. Actually, nothing seemed to matter that much except for the final handstand unbroken course. And I can definitely can speak about this. But Bella, did you watch this event for the men?
I didn't. No, I didn't watch the final. So I was like, this is why I was excited for us to chat, because I wanted to know what the heck happened. And honestly, I've seen elite athletes fail handstand walks a lot lately. So
I think that in order to set up the context for this, you actually needed to watch the women's heat, because there were several high-level gymnasts with big-time gymnastics backgrounds that were in that final heat, primarily Elisa Fuliano, Andrea Solberg, and Claudia Gluck, that are notable names that athletes, fans might recognize. And they went through the course, no problem on the way down. They did all the stuff in the middle, dumbbell, overhead squat, muscle up, overhead squat, dumbbell. They got back to the course, and if you don't watch anything else, fast forward to that section and just watch what happens over the next 5 to 7 minutes, because basically Elisa Fuliano kicks up, makes it almost all the way to the end and falls. And Claudia Gluck kicks up, makes it 3/4 of the way through and falls. And this just kept happening over and over with athletes that are really good at that thing. And then there were some more veteran athletes, and I don't think it was a rookie mistake by those women necessarily, but Andrea Solberg and Emily Rolfe, and there's one other athlete with a ton of experience in the outside lanes, that you wouldn't think would be the winning this workout,
Yeah.
that waited,
Yeah.
rested, kicked up, and then navigated the course in one effort, unbroken, and took 198. There were only 10 athletes left, so it was 10-point drop all the way down. And in that women's field was Karen Frey. She had a 97-point lead at that time. There was a rule at this competition that you must complete 50% of the work, otherwise you get a DNF. I like this. It's the equivalent of getting a 0. It's not removing you from the competition. And Karen Frey failed and failed and failed on the initial handstand walk. And if she didn't get halfway through the muscle up, so just halfway through the work, she would have got a DNF, and it opened the door for someone to actually make up 97 points if they were to win the workout, which it didn't end up happening that way. But Claudia Gluck was in the lead. And then Elisa Fuliano failed. And if she had finished that and Karen never made it through, we could have seen the biggest points differential overcome in the one final workout ever in the history of the sport. It didn't end up happening, but that was what was on the line. And when I flash back to what I said about day one, Saud wants to put the athletes in positions where they have to execute under pressure. And that's exactly what they had to do. And so that set the stage for the men that were going to come second.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm
Yeah.
all for kind of the minimum work requirement with a penalty, because you see it. I mean, it happens all the time. An athlete's in the lead by a certain margin and they don't try, or they kind of just skate through the last workout if they don't need to. That is awesome. I want more of that, because I want them to be uncomfortable. I don't want anyone to think that they have it made until they're on top of a podium, if they make it there.
And that takes us all the way back to Matt Fraser's first ever CrossFit Games Championship in 2017, where he is. Did I say that? Was it 2000? Yeah. No, he won in 2016.
Yeah.
What was it was the Fibonacci finale, whatever it was, where
Yeah,
he asked what 2017, what was the minimum work requirement? And he so that would have been a second championship, excuse me. And he knew that he needed to get through however many of the deficit handstand push-ups and the deadlifts. And you watched him approach those reps with a lot of scrutiny and intensity. And then once he got through them, you saw the emotion come over him. You saw him look around at the crowd. You saw him take a breath. You saw him realize that he had done it again, and picked up the kettlebells and marched him to the finish, even though the time had expired, which is the last time that I can remember an athlete finishing a workout after the time had expired, even though he didn't need to. And Ricky Garrard also did it on the obstacle course in event number 1 this year in Dubai. But so all of that is to put into context that the men are taking the floor, and basically, I just mentioned Ricky Garrard with the obstacle course. On day number 1, he took a third to last place. I mentioned this on the stream, but it was the first time that he had to finish that poor in an elite level competition since, I think, Echo Press at the games, maybe. He might have had one also on snatch and press, but basically it's strict deficit handstand push-ups at Rogue. So it doesn't happen very often. And then he fought his way, we know he got second place now, he fought his way all the way back from 25th to 3rd heading into the final. And Lazar Jukic and Roman Krenikov, I had a conversation with Ricky on Saturday morning, and we just kind of agreed that if one of those guys doesn't make a mistake that's totally out of character, they're going to be out of touch. And so the best he could kind of hope for was 3rd. And so he's having an incredible end to the competition, goes out there and basically destroys that workout. I mean, it was insane. Everything unbroken. It was cool actually to watch. He finished the last set of dumbbell shoulder to overhead. So all he had left was the unbroken section of the handstand walk. And you see him shaking his arms out, and you see him watching Roman, because Roman was in second place at this point. Roman was still working on the dumbbell, and he's just kind of looking at him, looking at his body language, taking it in. Roman finishes the dumbbell. Ricky kind of nods, and he goes, okay, I'm going to go for it. And so he goes for it, hits it unbroken. Great celebration. So I don't know who it was that caught that slow-mo of him saying, let's fucking go, baby, with slobber and drool coming out of his mouth. Very intense close-up. So he's got 100 points. So we know he has 628 points. And we just watch as athlete after athlete starts finishing. And Lazar Jukic was, I think, in 3rd place at that point. And he goes down the floor and he misses on the first of 2 freestanding handstand push-ups on these ab mats. And he goes back. And you don't think too much of it. We had seen Fuliano and Gluck fail and then get it eventually on their 3rd or 4th try. Anyway, Lazar goes back again, attempts it, fails at the same spot. He goes back again, attempts it, fails at the same spot. Many other athletes are starting to finish. I'm looking at the math and I'm saying, He has to be the next finisher, or he can't beat Ricky anymore. And then Fabian Benito, who is way behind everyone else because he was the only one to fail on the first time through. He finishes. There's only 3 guys left on the floor, and I'm like, that's only 30 points. He can't do it. He's like, no one can catch him, but he just lost this spot on the podium and $10,000 to Ricky Garrard, who is in third to last after event number 1 and has now clawed his way all the way back to second place on the podium.
You never see that. I think it's one of those things we talk about often when we're talking about kind of where the points are on the podium. You never see the top 3 athletes below kind of 10th place, or not often. Usually it doesn't really matter if you win all the workouts. It doesn't really matter if you come in second or third, as long as you're consistently at least in the top 10. To come back from getting a 25th, that's classic Ricky. I think that's awesome. I mean, I love watching him compete. It's so much fun. And the fans love him. No matter where you are in the world, the fans love watching him throw down. So I agree with you, Chelsea. Yes, it's fun watching him compete. But also, I want to give it to Saud for doing the point differences, because that makes it even more fun of a story at the end that you get to see. And you're doing all the math in your head, Brian. You're like, you're calculating everything, all of these spots, falling, what he needs to do. And he's out there on the floor trying to figure out the same thing. They all are. They're like, what do I need to do? And they're trying to do fitness at a high level.
I don't want to say no surprise because there were a ton of good content creators there, but Truth Films, Marius, who did some work for us throughout this season, is the one who did end up capturing this here at the end.
Yeah, and he turned that around in like 30 minutes. So
he's very good.
Yeah. So I had a unique perspective in this because I was in that, I was shooting photos and I was down in his lane. I actually got like mid-spit photos. And he crossed the finish line. He grabs me and he goes, what do I got to do to get second? And I'm like, and then we watched Roman. I'm like, well, you need 3 more people. And then he's like, okay. And then I forgot who came in third, but I remember Braun came by. And he went over and was like, Braun, thank you. And then it was Luca and Lazar were both going. And Lazar looked over at Luca, and Luca looked at Lazar, and then they both went up. And Lazar failed, and then Luca failed. And they went back, and they just, and I asked Lazar about that. I'm like, how did your brother know that he could potentially kick you out of second? He's like, oh, yes, he knew. He wasn't going to let me do second, but it was out of it at that point. It was out of his hands. So, it was just some fair gamesmanship there and brothers.
And I know that last year, I know last year some people were unimpressed with Lazar's sportsmanship and some of the things that he did on the competition field of play. It was a really difficult competition for him. He was sick. He didn't know how sick. He didn't understand why he wasn't performing well. And he doesn't feel good about that. The way that he handled this situation this year, to me, was like total redemption from that. He took it in stride. And when he went and spoke to Ricky was kind of like, maybe it's a little awkward for Ricky. Like, he's like, hey, what happened, bro? And, kind of like his body language is kind of like sitting back from Lazar. He was down in a chair. Lazar was standing up, and Lazar's like, you got unlucky on 1. I got unlucky on 8. Congratulations, man. You won it. And that was it. And you see him on the podium. There's a good shot. I think Dubai posted a reel today. And at the very last shot, it's Lazar, Roman, and Ricky on the podium. And they all look just genuinely happy. And they're just there taking a picture together with their trophies. And I was like, man, this is very much matured Lazar Jukic from not just an athlete perspective, but a sportsmanship perspective. And for me, as a guy who's known Lazar for a long time, it was just as great to see that as it was to see what he did throughout the competition. I mean, he won 3 of the 7 events. Like, he had an incredible execution in competition. His fitness was extremely high, and it came down to the last movement on the last workout that cost him that spot on the podium. But take nothing away from what he did on the floor, add to that what he displayed in terms of sportsmanship off the floor, and it was a phenomenal weekend for Lazar Jukic, in my opinion.
I love that you bring up the growth of that. Sorry, Pat. I love that you bring that up, because last year we were there watching him kind of have a mini meltdown of sorts. It's like, okay, you're a very fit individual. You know how to compete. What's going on? And then seeing him throughout the year a few times, every single time I see him, I'm actually more and more impressed by his media presence, by the way he communicates and interacts with other athletes. I love watching him succeed because of that. When athletes have a really good kind of socialization with other people and they're having fun and they're being nice, and it's not this, oh, if I'm not doing well, nobody can have fun, nobody's having a good time. He's become something where people enjoy hanging out with him and enjoy competing alongside him. And so that's why, I love hearing that he had a good attitude and that he was kind of fun to be around, because that's what I've seen the last year compared to how it was, in 2022. So I love that it's, continuing to get even better for him.
And
I think
beyond
mostly-
any of that, he's a big brother to Luka Jukic,
Yeah.
who's a young competitor that's coming up in the sport. And I think that sometimes people can lose sight of the fact that Luka's 25, or you think he either just turned 25 or 26, and Lazar's either 28 or just turned 29 during Rogue. I think maybe they're either way, they're 3 years apart in age.
Yeah.
And people mature during that time of their life, especially men do anyway, and not just as humans but as athletes. And another thing I'm not sure that is understood is how seriously these athletes take this sport. I had a great opportunity to chat with Luka Jukic for about an hour after the first day of events, while he was doing a cool down and some walking in the pool and whatever else he was doing to get the legs back under him. And he just let me in a little bit to the attention to detail in every domain of his life. He obviously competes as much as anyone in the world in this sport. Well, I don't know if that's obvious, but he does. And he and his brother study this sport. They study the history of the sport. They study the athletes in the sport. They talk to as many people as they can to gather information about nutrition and sleep and body work and training cycles. And they're all in on this. And they have given up birthday parties and New Year's parties and opportunities for social events, just like we know that Matt Fraser did for several years. That's how serious they are about committing to this. And when something goes on during a competition that's not fair, which happens all the time, by the way, in their perspective, they're hyper aware of it. And in the past, they have been hyper aware and sometimes aggressive in terms of pursuing that fairness. And even Luka this weekend, he saw some things that he didn't think were fair, but the way that he addressed him was totally different than what I remember from 12, 18, 24 months ago, watching him at some of these competitions and talking to him personally. And that's, as a big brother myself, that is also like a really cool thing when you can kind of lead by example and see your brother make maybe some better decisions at a younger age than you did, which is also definitely the case for my brother.
I love watching the two of them. We got to see them in Madrid, and they're looking at each other on the floor as they're competing, communicating in this. I mean, they're not even speaking to each other, and they're just looking at each other, and they know what the other one is going to do next. And they're playing together. And they even said that, I've asked them, how does it feel to be competing against your brother? Especially with Luka, his brother's older. He's had a little bit more success on the bigger floors. And he's like, well, I'm not really competing against him. We're competing together. Yeah, he's my brother, but we're doing this together. And that is so fun to see. So honestly, if you have anyone on this podcast in the next year, get the two of them on there. Just rack everything in their brains. They're so much fun.
Man, it was in 2021 at the CrossFit Games. It was the first time that either of them came on the Sevan podcast. I told Sevan, I was like, dude, you want to have these guys on? And he's like, I don't know, I'm not sure. We did that podcast with them from Madison, and we got off of it, and Sevan was over the moon. He's like, dude, those guys are awesome. We had this so much fun with them. They're dynamic together, whatever. And I'm sure that many of you who watch this stuff have seen them over the years, have their ups and downs on the floor, off the floor, whatever. And it's, for someone like us, people like us who kind of know them a little bit, it is cool to watch them develop off the floor as well.
Yeah.
I want to bring up this comment that Justin and kind of bring some perspective. A big fan of Lazar. He sent me a message congratulating Ricky and complimenting him on what a fighter is. Classy move. A lot of people won't remember. I mean, I think it is. People will remember that Ricky's first competition back from suspension was Dubai 2 years ago. And it was actually the first time Justin met him.
Oh my God! Did you see that picture Audrey has?
Is that you, Brian?
I was assaulted by her at the CrossFit Games.
Was that 2021? What year
this was
that?
this year.
That was this year.
No.
So
the Games this year.
Yeah, odd always. Audrey's always distracting us here, um, in a good way.
Love
Obviously, we
it. I
appreciate her
love
and
it.
everything she does. But that year, Ricky was kind of a lone wolf. He didn't know how the athletes would respond to him. The first athletes that befriended him and kind of like talked to him was Lazar and Luca, and it started from there. And then I think they've built up a friendship and kinship since then. And I think that's what brings these athletes back to Dubai, specifically these three that finished on the podium, is that they kind of got their chance there. And I think they're very grateful to Saud about that. And also, it's almost like a chance for them to come there and just kind of rekindle those memories and have that just get together. Because I mean, outside of maybe Rogue and the games, this is probably the only time that they all get together. These high caliber athletes, and
Yeah.
it was just really cool.
Well, these three in particular, because I don't think Lazar has ever competed at Wadapalooza, and I don't think that he likely will. It just
Yeah,
doesn't fit with his
no.
schedule that much.
Yeah, it doesn't interest them at all. I talked to him about that. It's like no interest to him. You know, but it was also kind of cool. Roman kind of getting out of his shell. I don't know if you saw that, but he got interviewed afterwards, and he barely used his interpreter.
I love that.
And
Tennessee's been good to him.
Yeah, but it was really cool. He thanked thanked the crowd. He thanked the sponsors. He talked about how much this meant for him. It was awesome, and it was really cool.
And then and he closed by saying that he misses his wife and kid.
Yes, he does, because he's been gone from Tennessee for a while now. He went to South Korea for a seminar, and then he came straight here. And his best friend lives in Dubai. He spends which is good. Yeah. I kind of want to go back to the women's though. We kind of skipped it. We went on this. I think it was a 25-point lead that Gluck had over Solberg, and like you said, her and Fuliano and Gluck were the first off the hands. They went, but Andrea struggled on the ring muscle ups, which she's been known to do, and she's working on that. But she didn't break down. She didn't panic at all. And she just kept her game plan, and she knew once she got back to the handstand, I was able to go to talk to her about this. Once she just, all she needed to do was get to the handstand, walk, and she had no problem. And then she was watching the girls in front of her just fail, and she just, didn't get too excited. She didn't speed up. She kept it smooth and fast, and won the event. And she knew she got second when she crossed. Because Emily Rolfe was right there, and I think the other athlete you were talking about was Mia Hesketh.
Yes,
was the other
it was.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
and she was extremely excited as well, because during the warm up, some of those athletes struggled a little bit, and but it was just unfortunate that happened with Claudia and Alicia, especially Alicia. I think at the end she might have messed up her ankle. Because it was a close race, and I think she spread out. She might have messed up her ankle at the finish, but it was a fun final. It really was. So, Emily did a great job, just across the board.
I would just want to, I don't have enough positive things to say about Roman Krennikov and Karen Frey, two-time champions there. Both of them have won the last 2 times they've been there. We talk about them all the time. We'll have plenty of time to talk about them. Andrea Solberg, to me, was the most impressive athlete of the competition this weekend. I said this on the stream, kind of just, sometimes this happens to me where I just like have a thought in my mind and I hope that it's right, but I did check since then. And I said, this is the best version of Andrea Solberg that I've seen since Norway in 2019-20 season, in the off season. And she took second place in that competition back then. I had to Gabby Magawa. Andrea had already gotten an invite to the games that year through the Open. She did very well in the Open. And then Sanna van Leinen got the invite that year, and Jackie Dahlstrom was fourth. Rebecca Widdesen, who made the games this year, was fifth. But actually, I can't remember I think it might have been Lena Richter or one of the other Norwegian athletes up there. But they said, like, you're absolutely right. Like, this is the best competition she's had since then. And it was amazing. If Patrick can scroll to the right here, it still has the correct event finishes. She was 11th and 22nd on the first day. Okay, fine. And we know she's never going to be amazing on the lifting. Once we get to the tennis center, fifth, seventh, third, second, first, first. Fifth, seventh, third, second, first, first. That's basically what Ricky Gerard did. Like this was an insanely good competition for her. And the fact
Did
that
you
she's
ask
finishing,
her?
I
I was
spoke
going to
to
say, did
her.
you ask
I
her
went up to
anything?
her.
Yeah.
I went up to her on the competition floor, just during I think it was when the Gulf Coast guys were getting their awards and doing their ceremony. So prior to the individual ceremony starting, and I just said, hey, because you know how these competitions are. If you don't say something to the athletes, like you might never see them. There's like everything ends and they disappear. They go to a drug test or get their money or whatever. And so I just saw her and I took a chance and I said, Andrea, I was so impressed this weekend. Was so awesome watching you compete over these last 2 days. Congratulations. And she's like, and by the way, because Patrick's already was asking about our predictions, I picked her 19th
I
and she
know.
finished second. She finished second. It was so impressive. And she said, yeah, I shocked myself a little, but I felt really good coming in. I didn't know what was possible. And I'm just so happy. Thank you.
So I kind of have obviously I have some insight on that.
Yeah.
Because her and Sahar are training partners. They're best friends. And, that first day, both of them, if you look at their first day, they were similar finishes. But you would expect that from two of the smaller athletes in the field. But then you have someone like Claudia Gluck, who's very similar build, that just crush it, mainly the obstacle race. But when I talked to both of them after the weightlifting event, they kind of shrugged it off. Like we did what we had to do. They're both happy with what they did, but then they both looked at it. It's like, we're going to a tennis stadium and we're going to do CrossFit. And I think the best definition of Andrea, if you look at her success, and Brian brought it up, she made the games because of the Open. She's a CrossFitter. And I think that bodes well. I think that bodes well for both of her and Sahar, and other people are just known as CrossFitters, because we're looking at a possible games where we might not see as many odd object stuff or some of this other stuff that might hurt some smaller athletes. We don't know that for sure, but but these are athletes that do traditionally well. I mean, Andrea, she needed experience. You saw that at Madrid where she did really good, but when it came to the ring muscle up workouts and some of the other stuff towards the end of the competition, she kind of fell back, and she was really disappointed with that. She had something to prove here at Dubai, and she told me that. And Sahar was the same way. And I don't know where you had Sahar. I don't think you had her as low in your rankings, but she finished sixth. And then you have someone like, and then we can't speak enough about Claudia Gluck as well. I mean,
oh my gosh.
She's someone that, Brian, you've had your eye on, like, ever since Lowlands. You wanted to see who she was and what type of athlete she was, and to see her, compete.
So she was the one I wanted to know about, because I'm looking at Claudia. I saw her on a team in Madrid. Team did great, came in second. Last year she was in Dubai. I want to say, let's see, I pulled up all of her competitive stats. Thank you, Competition Corner. Seventh last year. And I would say the field is more competitive this year. And I'm incredibly impressed. But the thing is, there's a lot of these kind of European athletes that I'm looking at that have had a phenomenal offseason. And I want to know if I'm going to see them again. And we talked about this last time, like with everything coming forward, I want to know if this is what we're going to see, if this Claudia is who we're going to see at semifinals, and then if we're going to be able to see her again at the games.
Well, tradition would say from Dubai, yeah. I mean, if you do well in Dubai as a Europe, traditionally you're going to do well. I mean, Matilda Garn / Karina Freyova is a perfect example. I can't remember anyone in the podium at Dubai recently that hasn't made it to the games that same year. I mean, Brian, you probably know that. I mean,
no, we can look at last year.
You're looking at notes.
Benito, Fiebig, Fikowski. The year before that, Krenikov, Jukic, Gerard, Fikowski, Vellner, Krenikov, Fraser, BKG, Willie George. That was when Willie George was 10th place at the games. BKG, Travis Mayer, Rasmus Anderson when he was making the games. Fraser, Smith, Alex Anderson. That's Ben Smith, Alex Anderson when he's making the games. Noah Olsen, Frederick Gidius, and Rasmus again. And even if you go back to the early beginnings, there were some guys, Miko Arompa, Kenny Leverich, Like this
Mhm.
competition has always, that's on the men's side. Women's side is very similar. Frey, Garns, Rolf, Horvath, Holten, Magala, Sigmund's daughter, Frey, Briggs, Briggs, Green, Sigmund's daughter, Thor's daughter, Horvath, Webb, Sigmund's daughter, Briggs, Thor's daughter, Brooke Entz, Jamie Green, and then it gets
Throwback.
Lindsay Valenzuela. Lindsay Valenzuela back in 2013 when she was making podiums at the games. Like it has always been a place where if you make the podium, you are a top level athlete in this sport. Claudia Gluck specifically had a tough draw at semifinals last year. The one thing that holds her back from having this kind of performance at that level of competition is running, from what I've seen. And there were
Yeah.
three workouts that had running in them last year at the semifinal. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. And if that doesn't happen again, then I think that even if there's one, which I think there definitely should be, that she should have a chance to do something similar to this. Maybe she punts one into the stands or has an average finish relative to the field. But if she can back it up with 5 other top 10 finishes against a European semifinal, absolutely she can make the CrossFit Games. Plus, she could always get better at running.
Yeah. And she's not, she's not big and heavy. She's fairly small and light. So she can improve that aerobic capacity.
Right.
Also, if it's the French throwdown, let's go. Home base advantage. Not bad.
Oui, la maison.
I think
And she's.
Oh my gosh. Don't start. No, don't start with the French, Brian.
I took 12 years of French in school.
Oh my gosh. I love that for you. It's so good.
well, we would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about Freyova. I mean, maybe it's just because we all expected it, but I was really impressed with. She had 7 of her top 8, or 7 or 8 finishes, or top 5. The only exception being that final one where she struggled. But I was really impressed because she workouts where you would expect some of the smaller girls to do well in, she did well in too. And I asked Facundo, we spent a lot of time with Facundo, and I'm like, you've been training her like a smaller athlete. He says that's been the plan.
But this was actually, that is true. And the work that Facundo has done with her, I believe is positive. I think she had got a great foundation working with Miko Salo, and it was a good time for a change. Her and Facundo seemed to have a very good chemistry together. But this competition, these particular events, one of the coolest things about them, and this just continued to happen event after event, even when you thought that it wasn't, is that the size of the athletes didn't predict the athletes who would do well on the events. There were small girls that were doing well on the EMOM with the front squats. There were Andrea Solberg was amongst the 5 women that tied, but she came within half a sandbag of winning outright the heavy sandbag carry. And there were other women that were bigger than her that were struggling with those. And you saw Karen Frey do better on some small. Like, it didn't matter there were big guys and small guys that were doing well on every workout, and that is really, really rare. It has become almost a scary theme of events in CrossFit competitions that you're like, oh, all the big guys are going to crush this. Oh, all the gymnastics are going to crush this. And so whatever these people want to say about the programming, I haven't listened to those things, Patrick, but if you watch the events individually and you see someone who is 40 kilos heavier than someone else, to maybe 20 kilos, 40 pounds, that's heavier than someone else, finishing side by side, and then you look in the next seat and you see a 6'3" guy squatting just as fast or just as many reps or whatever as a 5'8" guy, and this is happening event after event after event, and you're not giving credit to that, then you're not doing your due diligence in terms of evaluating the program.
No, I totally agree with you, because when we talk about who we think is going to do well, not necessarily is it the first thing that we think of, their kind of size and build, but it is something that matters, and it is something that historically you can lean on. This competition tells you that you can't lean on that. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters a little bit, but at the same time, it's not one of those things that is so obvious that one of the athletes that is, more dense is going to do better at specific workouts. This is awesome. And that's a great point that you bring up, because it's something that subconsciously we're always thinking about. It's, oh yeah, they're probably going to do well because they did gymnastics. They're probably going to do well because they're built like a weightlifter. Well, who's built like a CrossFitter, and what does a CrossFitter look like? According to this leaderboard, nobody knows. Could be anybody.
Branislav Alenkovic had a top 10 finish on the longest workout of the weekend.
That's crazy.
And I don't care that it wasn't a desert run. If you're having a programming workout that's 18 to 20 minutes long, there is an element of aerobic capacity that's demanded in that workout. And he was able to navigate that, capitalize on his fitness, And by the way, you speak of someone who's gotten a new coach and has trained like a different style of athlete. What Justin Kotler and Branislav Lenkovic have done over the past year that they've been working together or so has redefined this guy. He was so fun to watch. He had a couple bottom finishes still. He had a couple event wins, 2 out of 7 or 2 out of 8, but he's also starting to put some performances on the board that you're like, okay, that would not have happened 3 years ago, 5 years ago for Branislav Lenkovic.
I think the
I
best
was incredibly surprised.
the best example of that is, you're right, he did have some that were he didn't do so well, but the OG Chipper is like a perfect example where he finished 9th. That was something I wouldn't think he'd finish top half. But you know, his aerobic capacity with that workout with some of the odd movements there, he did fine. He handled it really just expertly. Kind of want to throw some names out there and just get your opinion on your thoughts on them. Let's start with the men, since we're talking about the men. We talked about the 3. Now this is someone, Bella, that you know and that you had on your. I think you had him 2nd or 3rd on your picks, but Fabian.
Fabi, I have so much faith in him.
Yeah, he was in 3rd going into the final event. Oh no, he was in 3rd heading into the event 7 elimination.
7.
He was in 7th event and finished 4th. And then, of course, you're a guy we had on, Enol. So those 2, I thought, I think Fabian he's someone that, now that he has the confidence and he's going to build upon that. And then I think Enol's was Fabian last year. And I think he's catching up.
I agree with you. I think Fabi is a phenomenal athlete, and the confidence that he actually got from the games is what he's bringing now. He didn't know he could, like, in his mind, he knew he could do it, but he didn't actually fully believe it. Now that he's gone to the games, he has this. We saw him on a team at Madrid, and it's just the same Fabi. He's stronger than he's ever been, so it's really fun to watch him compete. And I know you guys had Anjol on there, and I think it's fun to watch the 2 of them because they train together, training culture, phenomenal crew. But Anjol, he's the opposite. He's very fit, but in his mind, he's already number 1.
Yeah.
But he's also, in his mind, he's also telling himself, I'm not number 1. I don't even deserve to be here. So he's battling himself more than he's battling anybody else. So I enjoy when I see him succeed because I do believe that he's also incredibly fit. And regardless of what happened with semis last year, seeing him on a team in Madrid, both of them, they're phenomenal athletes. And I mean, I've loved my Spanish athletes. They're so much fun. They're so nice. And they've got just such a great perspective of family and culture that they bring to CrossFit, which I think is really special. So seeing them both do well this weekend, I mean, I was pretty pumped.
And by the time that the leaderboard settled, and I know we can't see the total points there, Benito was 557, 48 points behind Lazar Jukic. Anjolikai was 531, Alex Katulis 521. That was a kind of a tight group. And then Alenkovic, Branislav in 7th place, 466, nearly 75 points behind Katulis. And I want to throw Katulis into that group with those 2 guys, not because he's Spanish, but because last year Benito was 1st here. Anjolikai was 6th. Alex Katulis was 5th. I think that we've kind of acknowledged the fact that this field, well, obviously there was 10 more athletes, actually, 12 more athletes at the start of the weekend than there were last year. And with the invites, there was a little bit more depth, a little bit more star power in this field. And all 3 of these guys backed up a good performance last year with a good performance this year in Dubai. And for whatever reason, there are just some athletes that they're not built for the CrossFit Games season. Alex Katulis has never made the CrossFit Games, but he's regularly having these insanely good performances. Speak of an athlete who had a strong finish. Look at Alex Katulis's closing streak of events on this last day. Considering that Roman, Ricky, and Lazar are in this field and they're taking top 3 finishes on most of these, 4th, 3rd, 5th, 3rd. 4th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 3rd. Is that right? 4th, 3rd, 5th, 3rd on the last 4 events. It's an insane close to a competition. He was outside the top 10 coming into the last days. In 14th, moves all the way up to 6th, which is inside the big money positions. It was awesome to watch him do that. And these 3 guys, I think, have proven to me that semifinals might be a little bit of a toss in the air for some of these athletes, which is okay.
Yeah.
But if you throw them into a Madrid, a Dubai, or any of these other kind of semi-big competitions that exist all around Europe, Athens Throwdowns, French Throwdown when it's not a semifinal, these are athletes that you must take note of, and they're going to be in your way if you're trying to take the money spots.
These are CrossFitters, though. That's the thing. Even the ladies said it. They were excited to get into the stadium to do CrossFit. And Alex did very well at the CrossFit events. And so that's one of those kind of professional CrossFitters that you're seeing. He had great success this weekend. We've seen him, you see him compete all the time, and he's very good at CrossFit. But maybe not as much as an athlete in the other sense of what the actual CrossFit Games is expecting of these athletes to be able to do.
Who's up next, Patrick?
Oh, he's on mute.
It's a tricky mute button.
I know. Well, I want to talk about, you talked about people that did well in CrossFit. I want to talk about someone who struggled in the CrossFit events, and that's Chandler Smith. We know that Chandler competed the week prior. He came in, he's been on the road traveling. He's still traveling. He's not heading back home anytime soon, at least for another couple of weeks. He's got some obligations. And he came in, I asked him and Ricky, and they both said that their legs were dead. And Chandler, I wonder why. But Chandler started off the second and eighth place, but then after that kind of fell off. I actually think it's impressive that he finished where he did. I know he's not very happy with it. That's not how he went. That's not how he operates. But your thoughts on Chandler?
I expected this performance from Chandler. I'll say that. After last weekend and everything that they had to go through and all of the excitement of we're going to go skydiving, we're going to go surfing, we're going to do all these things, that is not going to prepare you to compete against Roman, Ricky, Lazar, and the rest of the top 10 guys. If he was completely well rested, he had come into Dubai a week early, he hadn't competed the week before, he was healthy, he wasn't sick, all of these things, I think we would have seen a different side of Chandler. But it's one of those things, there's always going to be something that's not right. You're going to be tired. You're going to have a competition the week before, maybe 2 weeks before. There's always an excuse to be had. And I think he put up a solid performance. I mean, 12th in this field is not bad. But there's always an excuse to be had for not performing that well. And for me, I wasn't crazy surprised about 12th. I know you had him higher than I did, Brian.
He actually finished 15th.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
15th.
But he posted on his Instagram yesterday, a day ago, and he said there's a paragraph or so, but he's trying to maintain his fitness that he had achieved during the season. Competing, working, and traveling more than ever before. Unsurprisingly, this did not work between injuries and sickness. My body has been telling me to slow down since September. Time to take a few step back to take a few steps forward. So he's acknowledging that he has been competing more, traveling more, and that he's not feeling great, in the ways that you need to perform at the highest level in this sport. And, I think in this case, we just have to take his words more than trying to assign anything else to it.
Yeah. And we'll talk to, we'll refer to someone on the female side that had very similar sentiments when we get to that. But Brian, the Brazilians.
Kaique!
Yeah. Overall, how would you rank their performance combined collectively?
They finished 2 points apart from each other. Michael Smith was 11th, 362. Kalian, 12th, 361. Kaique, 13th, 359. They had their performances in many of the events were very similar, 8th and 6th, 22nd and 21st. And I thought they did great. I mentioned this on the stream that if you didn't watch the South American semifinal this year and you only watch them at the CrossFit Games, you did not get a chance to see how great these athletes are. And that's the case with a lot of athletes at the CrossFit Games. I've spoken about this with athletes coming out of South America in the past, that they can be really, really good in some off-season competitions. They're amongst the best in the world in South America, or in South America. But CrossFit Games is a different beast. And this was just another example of these, quite frankly, young athletes from South America going and competing at some of these off-season events and doing very well. Now, they're not, taking top 5 positions, but what I saw from these guys this weekend gave me hope that they actually could potentially make a repeat run at the games next year. Obviously, there's the big question marks surrounding Guimaeros and what's he going to look like at a semifinal, and he's going to take one of those spots. I know Augustine Raquelme still has ambitions to make it back to the CrossFit Games. It's not going to be easy, but I don't think that these were like one-off performances last year at semis. After watching them this weekend, I think these guys are here to stay in terms of being perennial threats to make the games. And when they show up in the off-season events, that they can have stand-up performances and are only going to get better.
I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Let's talk about the guy that the fan club that kind of told him to keep an eye out on is Toby Buckland. Your thoughts on Toby? Is Toby someone that can contend? And I imagine he'd compete in Europe, but is he someone that you can see contending for? Maybe he could be the next Michael Wislowski or someone like that in the European region.
You go for it. I've actually haven't seen him compete in the last year, so I can't say if he's had any crazy, he's going to make the games. I'm not confident enough in what I personally watched from him.
I think the best case scenario for Toby Buckland, if he's pursuing the CrossFit Games, is to be in the hunt to qualify in 2025 in the European semifinal, assuming a similar format to this year. But I think that if he wants to do that, this is exactly the type of opportunities that he needs to capitalize on and situations that he needs to put himself in. We talked about it when we did a review show after day number 1. He had a great day 1. He was in that top heat against it was basically a games field. I think 8 of the 10 athletes at CrossFit Games experience. And so he had a full day of competition, three big time events to go against those guys. And, Lazar Jukic just talked about it when he went to train with Roman before Rogue. Like, there's a difference between a podium athlete at the games and a top 10 athlete. And there's a difference between a top 10 athlete and everyone else. And there's a difference between people that are making the games once and every year. Toby got a really unique opportunity to throw down with some of the best in the world, and the things that you can learn and then go back and apply to training from that with the skill set that he already has, which the two things that I saw from him is he's already strong enough, which is a massive thing when you're only 24 years old, and that he's not intimidated. He's not afraid to go out there and attack and to fight. And he wasn't defeated by the fact that, I had a bad performance, I'm going to throw in the towel. He got back up and fought again. And I regularly speak about that. Adversity will strike in this sport. Athletes that have the natural ability or innate ability to respond positively to that in the face of a challenge, I think have a better potential for long-term success. So I would say those are two massive checks in the bank for him already. And now it's just time to go put those lessons into practice in the gym, get into another competition, whether it's this year's semifinals, or other competitions. I mean, we said, he's living in the UAE. There are other events around here that he could get an invite or a qualification to. And even if it's only competing in an event where it's him and Luka Jukic battling it out, and he loses to Luka by 100 points, but he's going head to head with him and losing by 10 seconds here and 5 pounds there and 10 reps there, he needs to rack up a little bit of experience on the competition floor. And I do think he has the potential to eventually make it to the games.
I love that. That's the long game of it. You have the potential, go get the experience, grow a little bit in your shoes, and then come back and we'll see where you stack up. Because there's always opportunity. And I think if you only think of the events in the CrossFit season, semifinals and games, if you think that's all that the sport has to offer a young athlete, you're missing out on all of it. Obviously, Toby sees that and he says, no, there's a ton of opportunity. Might as well see where I stack up. And then hopefully he understands kind of all of the learnings from it and has a good mentor along the way.
I think someone that falls kind of in line with what you're saying when you describe Toby in terms of where his career is, but might be who is older is Jorge. I think he kind of has a similar experience. It just in terms of, he's been to the game, he knows how it is. But as an individual, your thoughts are: do you think he's a year away, or do you think he has some more work to do?
I think he's a phenomenal athlete, and I think his repeat performances with Invictus, he's shown, hey, I'm phenomenal. I'm a great athlete. I'm strong. I'm fast. I move well. But I haven't seen enough of him on an individual field to really say that I think he could be a games contender. I was excited to see him this weekend to see where he actually was going to stack up and shake out. I haven't talked to him about how he feels that it went. I imagine it probably didn't go the way he wanted to. But getting individual experience is crazy important. And you guys know that. I mean, you probably talk to Devin all the time. I'm sure she's learned a ton in the last couple months just what does it look like to compete as an individual? What's the difference with team? And there's so many things that go into competing as an individual, also on a team, that are completely different, and trying to mentally wrap your mind around that, not just training, but it's a different mental game to rely on only yourself. So I'm surprised he came 16th. I thought he could have do better, but at the same time, I think it's a great place for him to be and get a little bit of confidence going into the season.
Brian, for you, go ahead.
Hold on. Jorge Fernandez, to me, has a very much of a feel of a Luke Parker, where he might not have the marquee events on the off season, but he could definitely get the perfect storm of events at a semifinal that could propel him to be in that hunt for a game spot. And by the way, he finished 16th in this competition. 14 of the 16 athletes who finished ahead of him have made the CrossFit Games before. So he's and if you go back to his only other premier elite individual competition, which was Rogue in 2022, he finished right in between Cole Sager and Henrik Apalainen, beating Saxon Panchik, Tim Paulson, and Jack Farlow. We won't count Lazar Jukic because he rolled his ankle in the first event. So he doesn't have these amazing performances. He's competed at Rogue in Dubai. The combined number of athletes that he's lost to in those competitions who haven't made the games is two.
Right.
So I'm not. He's competing.
I mean, he's doing what he's fit. He's very fit. There's no doubt about it.
And he's learning, and he's very eager to learn, and he's asking the right questions. He's working with Facundo now, who works with a ton of games athletes. He's training in Mayhem. He has opportunity to have conversations, experiences, watch and learn from some of the best in the world. What Lazar did for a month with Roman, he's going to get to do this entire season if he wants to. I don't think that a performance like this precludes Jorge from having a chance to make the games this year.
On the other side, let's talk about two games athletes, recent games athletes that might have had disappointing performances, Sharonki and Brion.
David Sharonke, again, an athlete who posted something on Instagram that I think is kind of all I need to know. He is late in his career, super experienced and veteran athlete, and his training is very specific. When he addresses something in the offseason, he's targeting it. And he basically said, hey, Guillaume Brion said the same thing. There wasn't a lot of gymnastics in this competition, and that's what I've been primarily working on. There also wasn't any running, and I've been working on that. By the time the semifinals come, Sharonke's fitness will be where he wants it to be for the best chance to make the CrossFit Games. And his fitness was not where it needed to be for him to have his best possible finish in this competition. He didn't know that, and he's okay with that. So I'm not really worried about Sharonke. Guillaume Brion said something similar. No real gymnastics, nothing too long. It was a tough competition for me in that regard. But Brion hasn't had that recent success that Sharonke's had. He's a couple years removed from it. He was better here last year than he was this year. I'm not giving up on Guillaume Brion as having his name in the conversation for European semifinals. But outside of the top maybe 4 guys, I think there's like 16 to 20 that could make those spots, and he's in that group. And I would say he's towards the bottom half of that group right now. And, kind of back to the drawing board. He's got a great relationship with his coach. And so we'll see. If I had to pick one or the other, I would put more money on Sharonke to make the games this year than Brion.
I agree with, kind of leaning on Dave to make it to the games. But I think it's, we've already talked about it. This event is not necessarily finding the fittest. So it makes sense that if athletes are so specialized and focused on their training on a specific thing in the off season, then they're not really going to be ready to take on whatever Saud has to offer. And he says, this is what we're going to do. It's a showcase. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to see what you can handle. If all they've been doing is trying to get better at running and there's no running, I'm not really surprised that they weren't ready for a showcase like this. And I mean, I think you had a lot more faith in, not necessarily David, but Guillaume going into this event than I did. I kind of had him in.
I had both of them. Both of them inside the top 10. And actually, a couple of people were like, "Damn, dude, you nailed the predictions." It was like I got the men's podium right, but after that, it actually wasn't that great. Yeah. And that's okay. We also spoke about it, the fact that this field is wide open. There are going to be athletes there that you don't know as much about, that are going to surprise, that you might think you know a lot about, that maybe don't. And that happened on the men's and the women's side for sure.
I love that.
PC, I got maybe like 5 more minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, you guys are flying, right?
He's flying. Yeah, he needs to get to bed. Okay, moving on to women. We kind of pretty much hit
Yeah.
all the women, but let's basically,
Yeah.
we didn't really talk much about Manon, but I think Manon, I mean, she had a great performance relative to the field, fourth place. She was contending, seemed like most of it. You know, kind of struggled in the obstacle course. Any thoughts on her?
I think
I
she's a
mean,
phenomenal athlete. She's strong. She's consistent. When she shows up, she does well. Nothing about her weekend surprised me.
Yeah.
I was surprised by Emily Rolfe. You had her in third, Brian, correct?
I picked.
And
I
I had
had
her pretty
Frey.
up there as
I had
well.
Frey, Emma Tall, who withdrew with illness, and then Rolf, and then Magnon. So I hit on Frey and Magnon.
Yeah.
Emily Rolf. I mean, we saw her with a significant amount of KT tape on her calves throughout the day on Saturday, and there was a potentially, well, there were like 250 heavy double unders, and then burpee box jump overs for speed. It's just like not a day to have, and she's had some calf problems in the past, so
Yeah.
I don't want to say that that's an excuse or whatever. After this I think it was after event. I can't remember if it was after 3 or 4 when I spoke to Kyle, her husband.
Mhm.
They said we're really excited for the rest of the competition, and look, the last day 672, so she turned
Yeah.
it around there, climbed back up into the top 10. But overall, I'm not too worried about this performance by Emily Rolfe. I don't think it's what she was expecting, but I don't think it was troubling in my mind.
Yeah.
Sahar, I think you had her in the teens, finishing 6th. Any thoughts on her?
Yeah,
I think
had
it's
her
a great
12th.
performance for her.
Had her 12th, and it's one of these things like this sometimes happens in competition. It was super fun watching her and Andrea compete in the last day. It felt like they were almost like thriving off of each other as they both kind of continued to push into it. The top 6 is where you wanted to be in terms of the money, so that's a great finish for her. And again, she closed pretty well with 4 out of 5 top 10 finishes, or 5 out of 6 top 10 finishes in the tennis stadium. So again, I think she's continuing to move in the right direction. I think in Asia, unless the Russian women actually start trying to qualify for the CrossFit game, I think the path to the games for Sungyeon Choi and Sahar Kaya is very clear if they're healthy. And it kind of opens up the dynamic of training season all year long that doesn't exist in some of the more competitive regions in the world, where I mentioned that there might be 20 to 25 men in Europe who could potentially take those 10 or 11 spots. You have to target that weekend. If you feel like
Mhm.
I'm unless there's someone out there that I don't know about, I'm one of the 2 best women over here, then and they've proven that over the last couple of seasons, then you can be a little bit you can approach the season a little bit differently, and it seems like Sahar is just continuing to improve. So I'm expecting her to continue to do so.
Well,
Um,
kind of the same note. I enjoy that she's doing well because a lot of the conversation is this region is really strong. This region is weak. Oh, well, they're only going to get so many athletes. And then when they show up to the games, you can't really expect them to do well. They're in the bottom, 10. This performance here makes me more excited for once semifinals comes around, and likely she will qualify for the games, how competitive she will actually be, making her region even more competitive, which on a global scale, we want the world to be very competitive. Yes, some countries and regions are obviously going to have more athletes competing, so you'll see more of those bigger names there. But you've said it, you guys are both going to be in Turkey, a household name now for CrossFit out there, and she's putting up performances to back that up. That's awesome to see.
Yeah, her trajectory at the CrossFit Games is similar to Colton Mertens, actually, where she's
Mhm.
just getting better by a few
Mhm.
spots each season. And I think that for the reasons I mentioned, and I mean, if people do not know of Joachim Rieg and Seaman, the top 2 head coaches up there at CrossFit Oslo, like they have a really good training environment there. Those 2 guys are extremely integral to that. Sahar is totally bought into what they're doing. She was 23rd last year. I think she definitely has a chance to push into the top 20 this season if she continues on this trajectory.
Mhm. I love that.
The next 2 women I want to group together, Norche and Camille. The kind of different athletes, but I want to kind of group them in terms of being surprising. Camila, obviously coming off, she's a games veteran. She's qualified multiple times, I believe twice, and she's coming off a birth of her son. And then Norcha is someone you're both familiar with. You saw her in Madrid.
Mhm.
Talk about performances, surprising.
I think that's exactly where I thought she was going to be. coming out of Madrid, she was top 10. I had expected her to do very well. She's a very consistent athlete, and I think going in, I definitely had her in my top 10, if not kind of top 12. So I love seeing her succeed. Again, consistent after seeing her in Madrid. She's one of those athletes that I can rely on being right up there.
Yeah, I think I had her 17th, so she's definitely outperformed what I expected against this field. But I think I did say that in that range of like 10 to 20 on the women's side, that I thought there were a lot of possibilities for things to go a variety of different ways because of either inexperience at this level of competition or the plethora of CrossFit Games team athletes who were competing that we just didn't know what the top end potential necessarily was for them. And yeah, I think Norcha Bleeker was great. I think she also put a great post on Instagram, kind of summarizing her weekend there, where she's at with her training. She seems to be in a very positive mindset. I know she's been getting a little bit of competition guidance from Andre Houdet. He posted something about her the other day, and Andre is showing to be a very, very, I think, good coach in Europe. I think he has the potential to become a great coach. Salmason Hellman, 3-time games athlete PC, but it was kind of 18, 19, 20. So 20 is like,
Yeah,
19, she got cut in the same round as Freyova, Sturt, Zagafi, Spiegel. So Semenza, she outlasted Emma Tall and a few others. So anyway, she had a kid. She's coming back from that almost 2 years ago now, and I think that she's going to be in the mix in the European semifinal for one of those last three or four game spots.
And then the next athletes here, I want Devin, Kyra, and Lauren before we kind of wrap up. And the three Americans coming from the West Coast. Just Lauren coming off an individual row competition. Same with Kyra coming off row. Devin, this will be her first. I'm not counting Zelos Games as her first individual elite competition. Counting this kind of as her first elite one. Thoughts on those three?
I think it's exciting. I think Kyra's last season with a team with Mayhem, I finally saw just how fit she is. And I think she's getting even fitter now, training as an individual. I think she did a great job. I'm expecting her to do well based on what I see, via social media and via Rogue. She's a solid athlete. I think this performance here, I love it. And especially with Devin, they're good friends. I think the American women showing up here, doing the best that they can. I think it's fun that they're right next to each other. I think, of course, Devin and Kyra would be right next to each other on the leaderboard. And I don't know, it sets them up to do well, but I don't think these are the events that I'm phenomenal at. It wasn't a showcase of their abilities.
Yeah, the thing is, we're assuming a little bit about the rule book here, but if everything is as expected, there's going to be between 9 and 12 spots in North America West for the women, and they're all going to be competing there. I don't think that all three of them are going to take spots over there, but I do think that at least one of them will make the CrossFit Games. Lauren Fisher was 13th there last year, and I think every athlete that's above her on that list from last year, if they decide to compete, will be in the mix, plus the potential of having Ellie Turner compete there, depending on what the rules allow for her. If I was going to pick one of these three athletes to make the games this year, it would be Devin Kim. I think she basically had a top 10 performance here. If she hits the jerk on the heavy lift, it's like 80 more points for her, and she makes the top 10. I was pretty impressed with her demeanor, very, very young, the youngest of the three of them at 21 years old. I think she has a very strong base for someone that age and that experience level. And so, like I said, I think they can all be in the mix. I don't think they'll all make it. If I was betting on one, I would choose Devin.
I like that I like that you mentioned that they're all likely going to be in the same semifinal, and I don't like that you chose one already. I'll say that. I don't appreciate you doing that.
Thanks, Bella.
Yeah. But I do think she has the strongest chance out of the three.
I did speak about this. I would say I spoke more about Kyra and Lauren during the broadcast than Devin. And I had kind of talked about the fact that I think Lauren's return to individual competition has been extremely successful. And I think that Kyra over the last 18 months has made massive leaps and bounds forward. And obviously, I could be, totally wrong, and they could all make it to the games. There's, I would say, just because I said that, I wouldn't, give up on them if you're huge supporters of them. I'm certainly not giving up on them, but it's competitive. Maybe I should just meant like Gazan, David's daughter, Lowen, Colin Brander. We'll see about Bethany Flores if she decides to compete again. Rolf, Kerstetter, Rail, Baker, Spiegel, Wilson, and Domet were all the athletes that beat Lauren Fisher. Behind them were Sydney McLishan, Emily White, who's Taylor herself is coaching, and he has massive belief and faith in her. Hannah Black, who people are a big fan of. And then you got some young athletes. I don't know what Trista Smith's going to do. Allison Weiss, I'm not sure if she's going to compete individual this year or not, but I think she has potential to be better. Freya Moosberger's down there. It's just, there's a lot of good women out west. Throw those 3 names in the mix, and it becomes that much more difficult to make it.
Yep. Strong regions. Talking about it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple other names we'll talk about. We plan on having Brittany Weiss on after Christmas. She just moved to Qatar. We'll get updated on her and what her season looks like, and talk about this performance. We mentioned Julia Cato. She trains in Abu Dhabi. She had a huge fan club. Brian alluded to that, especially during an elimination event. She wasn't expecting herself to make it through some of those rounds, and she was getting like the biggest. Every time they announced her name, she was just happy, and it showed. Jacqueline Dahlstrom, who just switched over to HWPO, I believe, as a training. I think she's kind of in the same boat as, like you mentioned, with Sharonki, where she necessarily wasn't training for the programming here, was training for other things. So, yeah. And then Sylvia Garcia, who you guys saw in Madrid, got the invite due to her performance. I thought she had her ups and downs. Specifically, the downs were the first day, and then she picked it up when he got into the tennis stadium.
Well said on all accounts.
All right.
I know you're tired, Brian.
Yeah, tired. I'm
Someone
tired.
wants to go to bed.
I got to finish packing and head to the airport. Sahar's already at the airport. Bella, thank you as always.
Of course,
For everyone watching, still tuning in or listening on the podcast, me and Brian, we're heading to Turkey. We got some cool stuff coming out. I'm heading over there to shoot some content. We got a workshop and a Q&A tomorrow at a local affiliate there in Izmir with Brian and Sahar. Should be very interesting and very fun. And then Brian hits the road again, goes to Italy, I believe, right?
Yeah, fall series throwdown. I'll travel Thursday, be there Friday through Sunday for the competition.
Yes, and then I will be back in the States hopefully on
I'm
Friday.
gonna try to find some rec specs that project my POV for Bella.
That's all I want. That for Christmas, that's all I want is Brian Friend's POV at an event.
Yeah. There you go. But I'll be heading back to the States on Friday, short trip to Turkey. And then we are planning a bunch of episodes next week to kind of catch up on a lot of things. If you listen to the beginning, Bella, what are your next plans?
I'm gonna completely finish my move and get out to San Diego, so that'll be nice.
San Diego,
out there. San Diego.
Wales vagina.
I get that all the time.
I know.
San Diego, yeah.
Oh man. So thanks everyone for tuning in as always. We really appreciate it. Thanks for dealing with us. And Brian, thanks for dealing with the late night. I'll see you in hopefully see you in less than 10 hours.
I will not be picking you up from the airport, but we got you a hotel close to the gym. I was thinking you might need a nap before the evening's events.
Yeah, no, that's what she said. I probably will. So can't wait. That's the one thing I will say. One thing is, like, whenever we actually go on these trips, whenever me and Brian are on the same trip, we actually don't see each other that much. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
I see Brian all the time. When we're on events, me and Brian, we're connected at the hip. Can't get rid of him.
We do try to have maybe 1 or 2 dinners, usually with Facundo or something. But in terms of interacting, we do. Well, actually, we did interact quite a few times here, but we didn't really talk too much about CrossFit. More in terms of just talking about just stuff other than CrossFit. But anyways, all right, everyone. Thank you again, Brian. Get to bed. Bella, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
I'm
guys.
gonna just pack and head to the airport. But as always, be friendly, our friend.